Hi. In this video, let's explore a question of why does the component use the function keyword syntax to create the function, and why do the inner helper methods use the arrow function syntax? Why not be more consistent and apply the function keyword everywhere or the arrow function everywhere? Well, let's start answering these questions by first refactoring the app component to use an arrow function instead. So instead of function app, declare app as a constant and then set it equal to an arrow function. Great, now everything in the file is going to have the arrow function syntax. Now if you don't have the application running already, head to your command line and then fire npm run start in the project directory, and go ahead and visit localhost 3000 in the browser, and then give the entire application a refresh. Now you should find that the application appears like it did before. If you open up the logs, you'll find that, well, there are no warnings nor errors. So what gives? Why didn't we use the arrow function syntax in the first place if it's not preventing us from being consistent and running the application fine? To arrive at the answer, we must first explore a very nuanced detail of JavaScript. And that detail is that the function keyword creates a special this object that refers to the object where it was declared. And the arrow function does no such thing. The arrow function doesn't do any special binding with a this keyword, and is instead resolved in the same scope where it was declared, like any other variable. So this is better understood with some actual code. So let's go back to the index.js file where we can write some experimental code. First up, go ahead and create a function called createObject using the function keyword. So this is going to be called createObject. This function is going to return an object itself, so return a pair of curly braces. After all, it's called createObject. In this createObject object, we're going to have two fields. One is going to be called arrow function, so set this equal to an arrow function by using a colon to map it to that. The result of the arrow function is going to do a console.log of arrow function this, and the second argument is going to be the this keyword itself. Likewise, we're going to have a second key called function keyword function. This one will also be mapped to a function, but then this time we're going to use the function keyword to declare it. We're going to have a similar console log, and then this will say function keyword this. And the second argument is going to be the this object, a special one created for the function itself when you use the function keyword. All right. As one additional line for this createObject method, let's add a log at the top of the createObject method that says console.log outermost this. So this is going to represent this object as it's defined within the outermost context of createObject. Cool. So let's actually call this createObject function and set the result to an obj keyword. So now we're making a local obj constant that is the result of calling createObject. So overall obj is going to be this returned object as a result of the function. Then let's also do a console.log of this obj. So console.log obj, which is short for object, and then have the actual object as the second parameter to the log. Cool. All right, once you have those lines, go ahead and save the file and then revisit the application on your browser. You should find immediately that the logs show the relevant logs from the actual createObject function as well as your log of the object constant. First up, the outermost this is undefined. This is because the this object hasn't been set to anything yet in terms of the overall program, which makes sense. It's not representing any special object since it's not being created within the context of an object just yet. And then you'll get a log of the obj constant, which contains the arrow function as well as the function keyword function that was set up in the createObject function itself. All right, now let's actually work with those functions. Back in the code, call obj.arrow function, and likewise call obj.function keyword function as well. So make sure you have those two lines so that way we can investigate what happens when we do with the console.log. Now go ahead and pause here and try to predict what you're going to see as the actual value for these this keywords. Once you're ready, save the file and then revisit the application on the browser. And you're going to find some very interesting results. First, the arrow function this remains undefined. The arrow function doesn't do anything special with the this keyword. It stays undefined as it did in the global scope, or rather the global scope with the outermost this. But then the function keyword function does something different with this object. It gets set to the object that it was created within, which is the same as the result of the createObject method itself. So it's identical to the object that got logged above within the console.log here. So now you can see the subtle difference between the arrow function and the function keyword. The arrow function doesn't set the this keyword to the owner object. It maintains the this object to its current value. However, the function keyword will set the this object to its owner object if it's within that kind of context. Overall, this brings us to a conclusion. When you're deciding whether or not to use the function keyword or the arrow function, there's a key question that you must ask. Does a function depend on the this object to be defined as the same object that it was created in? Well, then use the function keyword declaration. If not, go ahead and use a nice and clean arrow function syntax. So how does this matter for the function keyword when creating a React component? Well, when it comes to functional JavaScript components, the surprising conclusion is that it actually doesn't matter in this case. We can use the arrow function to create the function overall, or we can use the function keyword. As seen, this app component is just fine using the arrow function syntax. After all, if you look through the app component's code, it's not like anything is depending on the this object to be defined within the code. This app component isn't being attached to an object. So the nuanced difference between the two syntax styles doesn't apply here. Either one of the two syntaxes could have been used. So it becomes a question of what is most convenient to use. For function components at the top level, I prefer to use the function keyword. And the reason that I prefer this syntax, even though it technically doesn't matter, is that it's more consistent with function components that you'll see within React documentation for hooks. For inner functions within the component though, I prefer to use arrow functions, since it signals that there isn't any special logic with this keyword going on. That way, if I do have to use the function keyword, if it ever becomes necessary, it's an immediate signal that there's special logic around the this keyword being used to represent an owner object. All right, so that answers it. The function keyword at the top level for the component is a matter of consistency. And arrow functions in the component are used to avoid signaling the fact that there's special logic going on with the this keyword. Cool. So back in the index.js file, if you wrote out the experimental code, go ahead and remove it so that way the overall code base is nice and clean once more. And with that, we've covered an elephant in the room of why there were two syntaxes for creating functions. Next, let's move on and start exploring that second question of how React hooks really work under the hood in the next section. Hey, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to head to the full course at udemy.com/reacthooks tutorial. Since you're coming from YouTube, I'm giving you access to the course at the max discount Udemy lets me create. I've posted details in the video description, and be sure to visit my website at davidtkatz.com as well, where you can find links to connect with me. All right, see you in the next one.